Hello, everybody. So this week we're talking about Chapter 7, Love and Communication and Intimate Relationships. And this may be my favorite chapter, to be honest. I mean, sexual behaviors that we did last week is kind of interesting. And I think that maybe the chapter on gender and sexual orientation is probably more important socially. But this chapter is kind of my favorite, just because in a lot of ways I've just been really interested in romantic relationships for a long time. Alright, the major research paper. So, I'm sure you've gathered all your articles, made sure that you gather the articles, made sure that you have access to the full text. You've read the abstract in each article. You've read the full text of each article. I haven't been getting many emails, so I assume that means that y'all are understanding the papers that that you're going to synthesize for the paper. But let me go over the instructions for the major research paper. Let's see. Hopefully, I have Canvas up here. Alright, so this is on Canvas, research paper instructions, major research paper. And so let me go over this with you guys. So as far as page requirements, 7 to 10 pages, but I'm more interested in making sure that you have the appropriate amount of words, at least 2,240 at APA format. So title page, brief abstract, body and references. Al Purdue is a good website to make sure you know all the APA formatting and whatnot. Should be double space, Times New Roman, and everything. So let's see. I'm not sure what else y'all need to know. So the actual content of your paper, let's go over that real quick. So writing, focus about half of your paper on summarizing. Summarizing the findings from your literature. So basically summarizing the results. But then more than that, you want to kind of say, what are the takeaways, overall takeaways? Like if I had 2 minutes to kind of summarize all of everything together, the results, what I say. And that's what I mean by synthesize the findings. That means what I was just talking about. And then a fourth of your paper, summarizing the methodology. So when you read each of your 10 articles, you're going to read, what methodology used, what scales they used, and things like that. Make sure that you summarize those. And then a fourth of your paper, summarizing the discussion sections, conclusions, so more like broader thinking type stuff. Let's go back a little bit more. So how to synthesize results from different studies. Make sure you read these, this 1, 2 right here. And I already talked about that as far as kind of like takeaways. As far as summarizing the methodology, make sure you critique the researcher's methodology. So this I think that I'll say more about next week, critiquing methodology. I'll make sure to talk about that next week with you guys. Alright, so let us look now at the rubric. Make sure you give this a glance over. Okay, so you want to make sure that you have an introduction, kind of just talking about a little bit of a summary of what you're going to talk about in your paper and introducing the topic in general. Let's look at this. So focus and sequencing on material clearly related to the main topic. Support strong peer-reviewed research. Make sure you have conclusions, and of course good grammar and mechanics, and most of y'all are writing well, so that shouldn't be a problem. Remember APA style and citation and references, and that'll be really important since this is a research paper. Alright, actually getting to the content of our lecture for today. So, just some introductory sort of remarks on romantic relationships in general before we start talking about different topics like attraction and like what is psychology found to be the most important things for initiating a relationship, like proximity and reciprocity, things like that. And also we're going to talk a good deal about communication, how to forge deep relationships, and things like that. So I've kind of used a lot of the information from our book and my own research to make this chapter, this week, kind of like a, how to initiate romantic relationships. What is it like to fall in love? What are the what's the neurochemistry behind that? And, relationship satisfaction, how to, what are the qualities of like really good relationships and things like that. So I'm really excited about this week's material and everything, but just some introductory remarks first, to kind of give us a kind of like an anchor a little bit for the rest of the lecture today. So I think that, and this is kind of like my own thoughts here at the beginning, that romantic relationships can be some of the most valuable interactions that we have. And I say that mostly because of, I guess, one, the amount of gratification that people talk about that they get from romantic relationships. Second, like just the sheer number of people who pursue getting in relationships and whatnot. And for me personally, what I find so valuable about romantic relationships is the intimacy. So that's kind of like two different ways to say the same thing: romantic relationships, intimate relationships. Like the title of our chapter is communication, and love and intimate relationships is the same thing. And it just feels good to have someone who loves us and things like that. If you remember from last week or the week before that, Dr. Pomerleau came to talk to you guys about hookup sex and whatnot. And if you didn't catch on already, we're married, and that's she's the person I married at the beginning of the semester when I was it took me like a week to catch up with you guys, with the class and whatnot. I kind of filmed myself before the wedding and honeymoon and stuff like that. So I'm not sure if you remember all that from the beginning of the semester, but yep. So I'm married, and yeah. So that's kind of the context of what I'm talking about here. And so, more specifically, the depth of connection and closeness and degree of love, and then just the satisfaction from feeling all of those things with another person. And I think that, so what we're going to talk about today is how psychology can answer the question of how can I make my relationship strong and meaningful, and also how to get in relationships, and if you want to, and and also we're going to talk about what is romantic love anyway. So, of course, there are benefits to romantic relationships and difficulties and whatnot. Being sexual with each other is obviously a pro that for people in relationships. Knowing another person really deeply, I feel like, gets in touch with our kind of deepest humanity of I don't know. I just kind of imagine people for, thousands and thousands of years trying to get close to other people and whatnot. And I think that romantic relationships is a way to pursue that. Knowing someone deeply and being known very deeply, I think there's a lot of gratification there. And romantic relationships can be really cool because, it's not just sex as you would imagine, but, also it's a very holistic sort of relationship where you can be friends, but also lovers at the same time. And of course, difficulties. There's always disagreements in relationships, and it's kind of just part of things. But also, it's good for us to bear in mind how some relationships are truly unhealthy, and it's not like people should just go into relationships. Everyone should have a romantic relationship, and everyone should stay in their romantic relationship. And it's like, no, that's definitely not what I'm saying at all. So what we're covering this week, basics and beginning of romantic relationships. That's what we're about to start on. Communication within relationships. And then I'm excited about the last part of our lecture. What does psychological and philosophical theory say about romantic love? That should be interesting. Okay. Like I said, we're going to talk about the beginning and basics of romantic relationships. So let's talk about the initiation of romantic relationships. So psychologists have been doing this research, mostly, social psychologists and whatnot, on what is it that, brings people together, kind of asking the research question of, like, who do I fall in love with? Who do people fall in love with? What makes them fall in love with particular people? That's kind of the main question, and The answers are not all that profound or anything, but I do believe that they are true in a lot of ways. So proximity, the more time that you spend in close proximity to another person, the more likely you are to end up dating that person. Similarity, so that's a pretty interesting topic, more so than proximity. Reciprocity, as in if they show you love, then you're more willing to show love back. And also, and vice versa. If they show you love, you're more, you get it. And then just general physical attractiveness and whatnot. How attracted are you to the other, and vice versa. So we're going to talk about each of those four. So actual nearness to another person. So, this means who you sit next to in class, and which clubs you go to and whatnot. And, proximity is pretty tough right now for coronavirus and in the pandemic and whatnot. But, unfortunately. It's pretty hard to get close to people right now, especially if you're trying to initiate a relationship. But just the mere exposure effect, like I said, this isn't a very sexy variable, but just being exposed to another person, leads one to feeling closer to them, more familiar with them, trusting them, things like that. So Bornstein found that the exposure effect to be important for why people initiate relationships. And greater proximity often reflects shared interests. So really that seems more like similarity to me, really, than proximity. That's kind of how proximity and similarity tie together, is that if you're close to each other in proximity, most likely you're sharing the same interests. So let's say we actually were sitting in class right now, and both of you were interested in human sexuality, and there you go. You're in the same class together and sharing the same interests and whatnot. But these other examples too, like meeting during travel abroad. So like if you value travel and things like that, you end up close together in proximity and often sharing the same interests. So if you will, for me, just get a piece of paper. This isn't going to be graded or turned in, but as far as activities for you this week, just get out a piece of paper and a pen or pencil, and kind of think about what sort of similarities do you think are important for you to share with your partner, potential partner, and whatnot. So take a few minutes to do that. Pause the video, and then come back after that. And so, just like proximity, similarity is one of the best predictors of entering a relationship. So, what kind of similarities? What do you mean? Is that like sharing the same color hair? Obviously not, but we'll see. So of course it's similarity in beliefs, interests, values. So values could be anything like, really valuing diversity, let's say, and you want your lover to really value that as well because you care so much about it, sort of thing. That could be a similarity. Interests, that's more so could be like hobbies, or you both do art and you end up really connecting in that way. And then beliefs, of course, this could be religious or otherwise. So if you're both Buddhist, let's say, then that could really, be a driving force in why two people get together in a relationship. So even personality characteristics, I would have to see the research on this. I don't think that extroverted people necessarily get together, or conscientious people get together, but maybe that would be interesting to check out that research on that. So not only is similarity important for initiating relationships, but it's also, as you can see here, positive correlated with relationship satisfaction and stability. So not only does it get you to initiate relationships, similarity, but it also helps with, once you're actually in relationships, to feel satisfied with them. So don't take this as a superficial variable for initiating relationships. And of course, demographics are very important. Typically, you see people, in around the same age, educational status, and religion, race, and ethnicity. Of course, crossing religions, or crossing different races, or crossing different ages, educational statuses. That's all fine and good, of course, but you tend to, as far as like what's most likely for two people to get together, typically they're around the same demographic. Yeah, but of course, you don't have to have similarities on these things like age, educational status, or race to have a good relationship. And we'll talk later about what are the qualities of a good relationship. Okay, we talked about similarity, proximity. Now we're talking about reciprocity. So Sprecher found that when we receive love, like we find that someone is interested in having a relationship with us, all of a sudden, sort of, we start finding ourselves interested in that person who's interested in us, even if maybe we weren't all that interested in them before. So it's kind of funny that way. And and the opposite is kind of true. So if you show some interest in another person, then that kind of gets you on their radar and whatnot, and your expressions of liking towards them may get them thinking about maybe going on a date or something, even if maybe they didn't necessarily notice you from the beginning. And research has shown that showing interest in another person increases their self-esteem and their sense of belonging. And as I'm sure most of you have noticed, obviously, most people start the initial draw together because they're attracted to each other physically. Yeah, so that's definitely, Meltzer's not the only one who's done research on that, but that's just an example of someone. And why it's like, so why is physical attractiveness so important according to psychology? Well, we've talked about evolutionary theory a lot, and physical attractiveness can be an indicator. So beyond, I'm attracted to them, I feel good around them because they're so pretty or whatever. beyond that, what maybe more subconsciously is driving our draw towards each other, and it could be that physical attractiveness could be an indicator of physical health. And remember, we want to reproduce our genes, so the people who are most attractive and physically healthy are kind of the best people to reproduce with. And just a side note here, men tend to place higher emphasis on physical attractiveness, not like women don't find physical attractiveness important, but just a little side note there that women in survey research and whatnot tend to rate ambition and status and money and all that sort of stuff as a little bit higher than physical attractiveness as compared to men. And remember that we'll just leave it there. Oh, okay, this is good. Okay, 182. And this is in the 14th edition of our book. Okay. I like that our book goes beyond just that heteronormative sort of narrative here as far as attraction goes. However, these evolutionary explanations are grounded in heterosexual gender binary and do not fully consider the influence of sexism and gender norms in producing differences in mate preferences. Historically, women did not have the opportunity for a career, and it was necessary to marry men who would be good providers. Although women have greater options today, gender norms are still present. Many people view female breadwinners as unfavorable and continue to believe that men should earn more in a heterosexual couple. These norms may account for continuing preferences of women toward men of higher income, even in online dating, which places a strong focus on physical attributes. Further, a report from Pew Research Center shows that, in general, men are valued for characteristics related to professional and financial success, whereas women are more valued for their physical attractiveness. And that's research from 2017. Still, people are doing research on that sort of stuff. It may be that when individuals are asked to report their ideal characteristics in a partner, they are indicating characteristics that are considered socially normative. Importantly, this research also excludes the partner preferences of people who identify as LGBTQ+. Among lesbian and gay participants in one study, there were no gender differences in preference for physical attractive partners, and earning power was considered the least important trait for attraction among these individuals. That was in 2010, so that's interesting. Perhaps if society reached true gender equality, we would see reduced gender differences in reported characteristics of ideal partners. So, the more gender equality we have in our society, the more it may end up that, who knows, men may really value money and whatnot, career status, ambition in their female partners, and female partners may end up starting to really like physical attractiveness, value that above income. Who knows? It's what we shall see. All right, let's talk a little bit about falling in love. This is interesting research because we're actually getting some stuff where they use like fMRI machines and different things like that, instead of research where it's just asking questions on a piece of paper sort of thing. So as many of you know, romantic relationships, they don't always begin this way, but often start with a fall, kind of like this lack of control sort of thing, and also this obsessiveness with this new person and whatnot. Often accompanied by feelings of excitement and giddiness, euphoria, and all these things. So feeling in love and unstoppable and whatnot. So what neurotransmitters are responsible for all of these like feelings of euphoria and whatnot? And so the main ones that are really important are norepinephrine, dopamine, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware. Maybe oxytocin, but I'm not sure. But PEA, and then endorphins. And so these neurotransmitters really work like amphetamine, very, very addictive. So like methamphetamine and whatnot, people do it once and feel amazing, and then become addicted to it. And it's kind of the same for romantic relationships. If Bob met Sally and Bob's totally obsessed with Sally, can't get his mind off of Sally, and just wants to hang out with her more and more and talk to her, text her, and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, it's like you can also have like feelings of withdrawal. So let's say Bob and Sally are in this relationship. They just started a relationship for about 3 weeks or so, and then she needs to go to Brazil for 6 months or something. Bob can actually like feel kind of the same feelings of withdrawal from addictive substances. So a lot of emotional pain, not being able to see one's lover and whatnot. And like obsessiveness is kind of similar to addiction, in that we're just thinking of the same thing over and over and over to try to make us happy. So you can kind of see here how falling in love, while it can be one of the most euphoric feelings in the world, it's precarious at the same time. You're not guaranteed that you're not guaranteed this person who you're falling in love with. So a few other so we just talked about initiating relationships. What does psychology have to say about getting into relationships, falling in love, and things like that? So now we're going to talk more broadly about romantic relationships in general. Like we're going to start with relationship satisfaction and talk about that. So this is like once people have actually entered into the relationship and things like that. So we'll talk about relationship satisfaction first, and this is a construct within psychology that's studied very heavily, and it's been found to, well, of course everyone just inherently wants their relationship to be awesome and whatnot. I don't think that's very controversial, but thinking a little bit beyond that, as far as psychology goes, relationship satisfaction is very related to like general feelings of well-being or general happiness in life and things like that. So that's pretty interesting that relationship satisfaction is such an important variable to just our overall happiness and whatnot. All right, so check out the scale. Pause the video, if you will, for me. Once you see this, let's see if I can. So we'll do this part first. So take this scale, and if you're in a relationship, then that'll be the easiest. If you're not in a relationship, maybe think about, you could even do this for a friend and whatnot, your relationship satisfaction for your friend. But of course, today we're more interested in romantic relationships. And or if you've never been in a relationship, you could say, what do I want in a relationship as far as these go. So check out this. There are so many scales, relationship satisfaction scales, but I kind of like this one. This one's pretty cool. So communication and openness, where are you on that scale? How satisfied are you? Are you completely satisfied with the openness of your partner and how well you feel like you can be open with your partner? Resolving conflicts and arguments, degree of affection. So all these things are very, very important for feeling satisfied in our relationship. Intimacy and closeness. Satisfaction with your role in the relationship, if you got some gender roles going on and whatnot. Satisfaction with the other person's role. That could use some fleshing out. Not exactly sure what those mean for sure, but overall satisfaction with your relationship. So pause it and then take this. And once you unpause it, you can check this out here. This is pretty cool. If you want to check out some other relationship satisfaction scales, but I like that this one actually gives you like the like where you actually are overall. So people who score 41 to 42, they're considered very satisfied with their relationship. And yeah, so that's pretty interesting. Okay. And if you will, I know this is a lot of journaling today, but if you will, pause the video and do some private journaling and whatnot. Think about what ingredients do most lasting, satisfying, loving relationships have in common. So hopefully you have some people you look up to, maybe your parents or grandparents or something like that. What ingredients do you think are most important for a lasting, satisfying, loving relationship? So pause the video and briefly jot some notes down and journal about that, and then we can compare and see if our thoughts coincide. So these are all things that psychologists have found to be really important in relationship satisfaction. So there are like, 10, 15, 20 or something different aspects of relationship satisfaction, and any one of those aspects could be you could be particularly strong in, or weak, or middle of the road. But self-acceptance, accepting who you are, your personality, your needs, and things like that is very important. Of course, acceptance of one's partner. A lot of people get into relationships thinking that they can fix the other person, and that just doesn't seem to be true. Shared interests, like we talked about before, or shared beliefs, things like that. The appreciation of each other, of course, just generally liking how you feel when you're around the other person. So a lot of what we're talking about today is very basic stuff, but what's kind of the challenge is to, actually manifest these sort of things. So commitment, and we're going to talk a lot about commitment later, is very important, of course, because life, it has highs and lows of things that go our way or not go our way. If we're committed to each other when things are going poorly, you're less likely to back out of the relationship. Good communication, so feeling understood, but also your partner feeling like you understand them. Equality in decision making. Ability to face and deal with conflict, that kind of goes along with commitment in my mind. And so what are some other characteristics? This was more so, so this is just a continuation of what we were just talking about, but seeing a partner as a best friend seems to really be important for being satisfied long-term with partners. Actually experiencing the highs and lows of life together, so not just being committed to experiencing the highs and lows, but actually experiencing the highs and lows together can bring people closer together. Maintaining frequent positive interaction, so this is one of the most basic things. If you generally have positive interactions with another person, the more and more and more positive things, then the more likely you are to want to stay in that relationship. And of course, sexual expressions of being attracted to each other and having sex in the ways that you see fit and want to, and adequate income. Throw that in there. That's actually pretty important when looking at relationship satisfaction scales and comparing it to income. If someone has adequate income, so $30,000 a year or more, something like that, they're more likely to be satisfied with their relationships. So that's kind of interesting. All right. So, like I said, this is kind of like miscellaneous topic time. We talked about relationship satisfaction, and I think this is our last topic for this sort of stuff. But we're going to talk about, continue our discussion on hookup sex. Also could be called like friends with benefits and things like that. But a lot of people think that they having sex is like an expression of love in a committed sort of way. So a lot of people only have sex with those who they're in long-term relationships with. But what about short-term relationships, one-night stands, or like I said, friends with benefits? Do you automatically love the person you're having sex with? So in my previous human sexuality class, I polled them and asked them, have you been in or are you currently in a relationship that is you would call friends with benefits? And about 40% of the class said that they are. So a lot of people would do that. And I wonder if they would say, yes, we have sex together or whatever, but no, I'm not actually like in love with them. But other researchers sort of have found that on college campuses, about 60% of students have had a friend with a benefit. And remember that if you make broad generalizations about men versus women, that men tend to be more satisfied with the short-term dating sort of circumstance, so like hookup sex or friends with benefits. And then women, of course, remember from Dr. Parmelo's presentation that some women feel fine and great engaging in hookup sex and whatnot. So, but by and large, a lot of research also shows that a lot of women tend to be less satisfied with friends with benefit situation than men because of evolutionary reasons that we've talked about a lot in this class. So this slide is more so just my own thoughts on things, but I wonder if, especially if you're already in a relationship with someone, but you haven't been sexual with each other, I wonder, and I think there's got to be some research on this, that having sex with each other actually brings you closer together. And so the question is, like, why is that? And I feel like the reason that we get close to people to begin with is kind of being vulnerable and showing ourselves and getting kind of showing ourselves kind of on like an emotional and psychological level, but also showing ourselves physically, nudity and whatnot. And I think that both of those ways, being vulnerable in both of those ways, psychologically and also physically, kind of can make people feel closer to each other. And so nudity is kind of like this symbol of being authentic. It's like, here I am, sort of thing, in genuineness. Yet again, here I am, sort of thing. That kind of seems a little bit similar to like when two people are getting to know each other. Well, imagine a couple or people dating at a restaurant and whatnot, and they're saying, here I am. I'm here before you, this is me, sort of thing. Let's get to know each other and whatnot. So it seems like there's some sort of parallel there between sex, nudity, kind of like this idea of psychological and physical nudity, if you will. So we're going to talk for a while, about 30 minutes or so, about how to actually achieve depth in our relationships. And after that, we will talk about some theories on love and sex, mostly from philosophical standpoints.